Thanks for listening to the Replatform podcast, sponsored by Crown Peak Elastic Path, hosted by me, James Gedd and Paul Rogers. We bring you interviews with industry thought leaders, the C-suite of tech companies, leading retail brands, showcase e-com tech, help you decide what's relevant, and hopefully make better technology decisions. All we ask in return is you tell other people about the podcast. So please do share and like our posts on social media. And if you are new, please give us a rating wherever you're listening or watching. So let's set up the latest episode. We're talking about outsourcing for Replatform and other technology projects. So this is looking about when external resource adds value and is relevant, and when it's not. Don't worry, this isn't the sales spectrum. We're not talking about investing in consultants. We're talking about generally how teams can use other resources to plug skills gaps or help them get better project efficiency, and also sometimes help build a business case for change to avoid distractions. So that's the setup. But let's start with one fundamental question, because we need to be really balanced on this. Otherwise, it's going to seem like we're just trying to hawk our own services, which we never try to do. Is when don't you need to outsource? Because people need to not spend money when they shouldn't.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think there's a few different variables here. So I think one, more recently, a certain level of build, so more... I guess a more straightforward Shopify migration. I think ecom teams I think if you work with our agency, everything else, I think I've seen a number of ecom teams deliver project end to end with internal resource, and it's been a fairly lean project. And I think there's probably some bits that maybe could be better in places, or things have been pushed into a phase 2 in terms of some of the internal bits. But I think those projects can definitely be delivered via internal resource. I think the second thing is about your team. So if you've got certain roles and resources and you've got the capacity, and a lot of the bigger businesses do, or they'll be able to pull in a project manager from another department, or pull in someone else that's got relevant knowledge and understanding and experience. In that scenario, I think, again, you probably don't have as many gaps, and you might have the resources available to deliver the project, even if, there's certain bits compromised. And then I think the third one is, I guess, if it's a bigger project, and I've seen some of the transformation projects where they've essentially brought in full-time headcount in transformation roles, and then you've kind of, built that team with a view to deliver a number of projects, and then you've got the resources internally as a result of that. But yeah, I think the biggest one, it's just about, because when we first started talking about this episode, the initial piece was one of the biggest pushbacks of a replatforming project is we don't want to distract the team from trading the site or their day-to-day roles. And the biggest thing just comes down to capacity, I guess.
Yeah, I think that absolutely nails it. And I agree on the smaller projects. And I've advised people who've approached me and said, look, can you work with us? If you don't need me, the project's not complex enough. It's a simple single site, really small product catalog. All you need is the right agency who has a consultative approach and therefore has the skills. And we know, I'm not going to call individual ones out. I don't think it's fair because otherwise we'll have to list all the ones we think are good at this. But there are some who are brilliant at handling those smaller projects and don't need an external consultant alongside them. And you don't need contractors because you don't need an internal project manager because the project's not that big. I've worked on several of those, as I know you guys have. So yeah, fundamentally, those, for everyone listening, if those things tick the boxes, then you probably are in a good place to just work directly with a smart agency if you get your agency selection right. But let's flip that now and look at when actually having external skills, and this could be contractors, it could be consultants, it could be one person, it could be multiple. So for me, I'll list the ones where I typically find the reasons that drive the need, and then maybe you can build on top of it. So number one is skills gap. And this could be somebody, say for example, migrating to a platform that nobody has worked on before, whether that is a Shopify, whether it is a Centra, whoever it might be, and don't have the knowledge enough about that solution, how it works, the strengths and weaknesses, what it's good for, what other third parties fit well in the ecosystem. Or it could be that you're migrating to improve something around maybe omni-channel that you haven't done before as a business, and you've never explored how to deliver omni-channel services within an e-commerce platform, whether that's click and collect, view store stuff, whatever it might be. So you want somebody to help you make smarter decisions. The next one is resource bandwidth. To come back to your point about distracting. At enterprise level, this is often one of the big pushbacks, isn't it? Is that don't want to take the team away from that, whether it might be, even though you're not launching during peak, you never would do. But actually, if the project's running through then into the next year, into Q1 release, well, God, you don't want anyone distracted during peak trading because the potential impact on sales revenue. So wanting to make sure that you can manage the streams in parallel. And then the other major one for me is oversight and consultative advice, where you don't need somebody full-time, but what you want is somebody tactically to come in and help you make a better decision. So this could be on product catalog structure, product catalog like data architecture, so that you have the product data set up right to drive things like merchandising campaigns, to drive auto recommendations blocks, etc. And to think through the implications of how product data is structured, because agencies can be brilliant at building a site. They might not think across all of the different eventualities for how you need product data to drive different parts of the website. That's just one example from a consultative and oversight point of view.
Crown Peak, enabling organizations to build meaningful digital experiences for everyone, everywhere. Engage your customers with our content management system, reach your entire audience with our digital accessibility and quality tools, and grow your brand with our product discovery solution. Find out more at crownpeak.com.
What else would you add, or do you want to expand on any of those?
Yeah, so I think going back to like my thing around kind of that pushback because of resources, I think that a lot of roles can be outsourced. And I think, we've worked together, you know how scrappy I typically am. And I think I've worked on a number of projects where, the biggest concerns have been more around like creating new content, creating new assets, managing catalog migration in a certain way. It's more that kind of bottom 50% of internal deliverables that have been the concern. So I personally think you can outsource the majority of that. The only thing I'd say is it needs to be a collaboration on some level, and you need to like make sure that, and we talked about this before, where I've worked on projects like essentially taken on everything, and then the internal team not as bought into the end product as they could be as a result of working in that way. But I think as long as you manage some of that stuff and make sure the internal team are capable when it comes to taking over, I personally think you can outsource a lot of the lower level internal deliverable pieces. I then think project management is a good one. So, you see that outsourced all the time. I think the other ones I think you already touched on. So that's solution architecting / like super user type input. I think that can be a really valuable thing to outsource. But yeah, I think my view is, we've had this discussion before, and I think you can't necessarily outsource the leadership level inputs, but I think you could outsource then the middle 50%. So you kind of need the people that are going to be hands-on, involved to some level. You need the top people to, be accountable. But that bit in the middle, I personally think you can outsource.
I fully agree. You should never outsource leadership and decision making. Every single project I work on, I always say that to my clients that a consultant shouldn't make the decision for you. They should advise and guide you on the right decision to make and explain the implications of decisions you are going to take for you to then make it on merit. Because if the business doesn't buy into a decision, how can it back it once the consultant or the contractor's gone? Or how can they understand the implications? So yeah, fundamentally agree with that. Then the subject matter experts. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because if you don't want to distract from BAU and you don't want someone to spend 50% of their time on a project, then you have to have somebody else doing the bulk of the work. But you've got to engage those people along, because they have to have buy-in. They've got to understand that it's going to support their role. It's going to improve what they're doing, or at least replicate what they're doing and not give them any disadvantage. But they've got to be educated in the new ways of working so that they can hit the ground running rather than being dumped something. So yeah, I fully agree that they need to be involved. Yeah, the bits where I see a lot of value getting added, and I've got a project at the moment with a client in the US, and if a client team isn't experienced in technology change and implementing new tech, then they might miss, or if they're not like e-commerce specialists and they're a team that's grown e-commerce out of a traditional business, they might miss some of the expertise around, let's take a specific, I had yesterday on a discovery workshop, which was, what page templates do you need? And the instant reaction is we don't know. So having somebody who can turn around and go, right, okay, well, here's what I would advise based on the requirements we've captured. These are the different templates. And this is functionally what you need from each of them. And you've got commonality across these. There are 6 common layouts that work across them. And there are unique ones to each page. And this is how you need those layouts to work functionally to deliver what you need as a business. Then all of a sudden you've translated the business requirements and the high level strategy into a set of more functional spec requirements that an agency can take and size and understand and turn that into a proper spec to build. Whereas I find sometimes between client and agency, there isn't that. It's like this translation thing that sits in the middle. The Babel fish, for anyone who loves Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that takes an output and translates it into something that is usable. Otherwise, you end up again, we want these pages, and pages are built by a developer, but they do not deliver functionally exactly what that team needs to use, and they don't realize it until it's too late.
Elastic Path is on a mission to break through the barriers that prevent commerce leaders from delivering extraordinary shopping experiences. Both business and tech teams are able to innovate on their own terms, fully embrace composability, and in turn, never compromise on what's possible. Learn more at www.elasticpath.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think the main theme of this episode is obviously what could you outsource to make delivering the scope of a project better. But I think the only other thing I would add is sometimes there's value in bringing in additional resources to improve the output. So if you brought in a design resource that could either push the agency, or you bring in an independent creative director or art director that actually takes on some of that. I think I'm a big advocate of that. And I think sometimes someone more focused on kind of back end as well, or even back office can be valuable dependent on the project. But that's more luxuries to, de-risk and kind of add value in some of those other areas.
I think those two are essential actually, because the first one, I've worked on a few projects where the internal teams just not have the bandwidth to create the content at the cadence needed for development. So they have a target deadline based on a commercial marker of we need to be live in March. The team cannot produce all the new content assets in time because they're switching to a new design, and the design's got different focal points, different crops, and they've got product imagery is not fit for, but etc. All that's how and we know how much effort and time is involved in getting that stuff shot, ready, done, artworks. So 100% agree on that, and flagging that early to people as well. How much resource have they got an appetite to do that? Not all teams want to do it either, because having to take loads of product photographs and recrop and do stuff, it's not for everyone. It's not exciting. They want to get on with more exciting campaigns. But the back office stuff. Interestingly, did a webinar recently where one of the speakers on it was a specialist in the back office, the supply chain, the logistics piece, and listen to her experience of where people have struggles and challenges where they might not have the knowledge needed. Say, for example, part of this replatform is they're launching marketplace integrations and they're expanding out into Amazon and other, and then realizing the different requirements from a product packaging point of view, from managing that from an order management point of view, from the links with their warehouse, from all of those decisions. You suddenly realize that if it's not your expertise, it's hard to make them effectively and do that quickly enough in order for the project to not be delayed by months, because you then got to do all your research. So fundamentally agree on that one as well. Discovery is another one we talk about a lot. So this is when somebody's selected a new technology. Now, we're not just talking about replatforming. This could be you set a new PIM or a new search and merch tool, anything. You obviously have to go through a technical discovery to really nail down what the implementation is, what the requirements are, how they're being delivered, etc. And this gets more complicated. The bigger the business, the more storefronts you got, the more countries, languages, etc. And often I find that businesses haven't gone through discoveries enough to know how to do it to the right detail, or to know how to articulate the requirements. And some agencies are good at it, others are just quite formulaic and don't always capture info to the right detail, and you get compromised spec and compromised delivery. So I think where people don't have the bandwidth or don't have the expertise to do discovery, bringing in, whether if it's a big project, a contractor, or if it's a small project, just someone quickly ad hoc, to get discovery right can save you a lot of money in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was about to add as well. I think the other thing is with a re-platform project, often you'll be working with a completely different, type of SI or partner. And I think a lot of people just won't understand the risk, they'll take all of the, design and all of the designs, or front end aspects, and there'll be a functional spec, but things like you mentioned earlier around kind of logic and back end, or how things are built, etc., won't be covered. And you've just got to get rid of every assumption, because if you work with the wrong partner, or not necessarily wrong partner, a certain type of partner, though the CRs could double the budget of the project, or add 30-40% or whatever, and there is so much risk in that. And the other thing is obviously, if the assumptions change it a lot, you might not be able to hit your deadline, etc. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that's obviously one of the riskiest parts of a project, especially if you're moving from, making a fundamental system change, and you don't know how the new system works, or tech stack works. You need to be very careful there. I completely agree.
The one area I think is really interesting is, if we take re-platforming first, pick a platform, BigCommerce, Shopify, Centra, Salesforce, it doesn't matter. They have different ecosystems, and they have different levels of pre-integrated connectors, apps, and ones that have a few installs, ones that have hundreds, thousands in the SaaS world. And there are those that have better interoperability with other connectors and apps within that ecosystem, so that you already have predefined flows to help you drive automation, rather than having to build out and do more code customization. And I think for each platform, if you are moving to a new platform you've not got experience with as a business, and the agency you're working with are specialists, but they have only worked with a certain number of third parties, what you sometimes get is an unconscious bias towards those third parties when they might not be the right ones for you. And I think there needs to be somebody, whether you have them internally, or it's someone in your network or it's a contractor who's an expert and specialist who comes in, to be able to scrutinize that and say, you've recommended X for reviews, but you're using Y for loyalty. Well, those two don't work so effectively together, and actually there's a better solution which will reduce your license fees, and it's pre-integrated, and it will give you that automated loyalty recognition of reviews, etc., etc. I think there are platform-centric skills that are useful to have, and also the ability to politely challenge what's being recommended, because it might not always be the right thing. None of us know everything about every platform. It is impossible. So having blended and diverse views brings better decision making in my experience, and that carries on not just on re-platform, but say you're selecting a PIM, the same principle applies. People who've got a good knowledge of that and how it integrates to specific other technology. So that, I think that's a key one for me. Next question I've got then is, you work with a lot of D2C brands. It's fair to say you've got a lot of really strong brands in your portfolio. From your experience of working with that specific type of customer, so a lot of them are fast growth as well, and they're not enterprise businesses, but they're growing towards what would be defined enterprise size scale of revenue. Although systems wise, they're not like a massive heritage brand like a John Lewis, for example. So where do you see it in technology projects in that type of business? What do they typically outsource? What skills do they demand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it varies. A lot of the different brands we work with have different size teams. So I think it does vary. I guess taking someone like Self-Portrait as an example, when they re-platformed Shopify, they had a super lean team. So that was a good example of where we just pulled in loads of or more junior level resources and just took a load of it off their team. And I think that was needed. But I think some of the other ones that we work that have bigger teams, I mean, all of the types of brands that we work with that are like that, I'd say are very focused on the front end. So I think, bringing in independent design resources is a big one. QA is another one that we actually somehow haven't touched on. But I think, that's something that a lot of our clients have outsourced to different types of companies to, again, kind of reduce pressure around UAT in particular. And then, I mean, to be honest, I guess we've been there, and we'll probably have a bit of a hybrid role of solutions and kind of managing the project. But yeah, I mean, I think typically on average, they're not as complex as some of the, bigger projects and some of the ones you've worked on where, you need big teams. So I would say it's more, you can take all of those internal deliverables and the gaps aren't massive. And it's probably more looking at the international side more, it's probably more the solutions and platform level specialist inputs that they need more than anything else, and maybe the front end side.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that too. But the one difference that I would flag is I've worked with some consumer brands who are smaller end of the SME, so a few million up to the 5 million level, but looking to grow fast. And they've got investment, and all of a sudden they're running loads of projects. And I've seen this where they're trying to re-platform, they're putting it in ERP, they're doing CRM because they know. And fundamentally, when a business of that size, which doesn't have project management discipline in there, because that's not what they never needed before, they need then a project manager, because you can't have ERP done by somebody, re-platform done by somebody else, and another business stakeholder making CRM decisions and no coordination, because you end up in an absolute bloody mess and you make really shit decisions that end up costing you a shed load to unpick, or you get blockers on one project because of a decision made on another. So I think the D2C stuff sometimes needs to pivot into thinking more like an enterprise from a contractor point of view, if they're adding that level of complexity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what they don't think, when I worked for House of Fraser, when the House of Fraser had a program manager, 4 project managers, a team of BAs, what the DC brand doesn't need is a PMO office with about 8 or 9 people in it. It just needs a proper, qualified, experienced, full-term project manager to control it, basically.
Yeah, I think the only one we haven't touched on as well, and I know we've touched on this in quite a lot of episodes, is I guess potentially isolating the integrations piece and putting that over here and putting specialist people on that, be that whether you're building a connector or using one of the middleware providers, because I guess a lot of those brands are going to be want to work with agencies that have a portfolio of brands, and they're going to be more front end orientated, so quite often that will be split out, I guess, as well. But we've talked about that loads and the pros and cons of doing that, so I won't open up that kind of worms.
No, it is true though, and interestingly, we're seeing tech providers like Patchworks really heavily investing in their product again, and improving self-serve tools to make it easier for businesses to use integration layers. So, but you're right, it's somebody's got to do the integration work, and it's either you're in an ecosystem where the agency builds the integrations and they might have their own custom layer. There's quite a few agencies, even in Shopify world, there are people who've built their own integration layers, like Function, for example, and various others. So I think it has to be done. The question is, who owns it? As long as somebody owns it, and there needs to be a counterpart within the e-commerce business, your business basically, to make sure that there is ownership of that relationship. Because I don't believe that you shouldn't just turn around and outsource everything and go, right, we'll let them get on with it, because that's there's danger. There's danger doing that way. I think hopefully that's been useful for people, because we obviously work on a lot of different projects. I've been involved in discussions on projects where I'm not even involved as a consultant, and I'm just giving a little bit of advice, or I'm listening and chatting to people to find out how they're doing it and what skills they're using. And I find it interesting because it's not one size fits all. You've got to pick the resource that you need to deliver the project. And I think my part and advice is this: is think about your RACI, which is your whole responsibilities, roles and responsibilities matrix. What roles and responsibilities does a project need? And this is from project management and delivery to subject matter expertise to sponsorship and commercial leadership, decision making, all those bits that need to get you from start to finish. And then what can you feasibly do with your existing team based on the size of the project? Do you need 20% of everybody's time in order to do it? And can you do that without impacting BAU? Once it starts getting over about 20 to 25%, you start to realize, actually, we probably need to bring in a contractor or maybe a consultant to help on ad hoc stuff. Or we need to have an agency that's got deeper resource skills, as Paul alluded to earlier, where we can pay more to the agency to do more for us, including more BA work and more discovery and requirements work. So you've got to start with defining that the only way you get to know what you can bite off yourselves is by thinking about those roles and responsibilities. And if you are currently in a discussion with someone about replatforming and you have an agency that's going to do a build for you and you're not sure, sit down and talk with them about what they expect from you. What do you need to provide to them and when? Because you'll soon find out where you don't have a comfort zone, basically. So that's my parting thoughts. Paul, what would you leave people with?
I think that, everything you just said there is really solid. And I think, I probably would have just said a couple of things that you said. So I think the one thing you said right at the end is, I think, discovery is one risk going into a project, right? You need to make sure that you handle it properly. The other one is what you said around kind of understanding the workload for your internal team, because you see so many people go into a replatforming project, get to a certain point in the project, and then they're like, fuck, basically, we don't have the team to deliver this, and then it's too late. So I think asking that question and, really building an understanding of what's required from your team early on will, make this whole piece loads easier.
Yeah, 100%. Having awkward questions up front is critical, and giving people the bad news early that is going to create a load of work, because at least then they can be honest and tell you what impact it will have on their day-to-day stuff. So excellent. Hopefully that's been useful. Feel free to disagree with us. Feel free to add on to other areas where you see from your experience in projects, skills and resources that people need to consider investing in from a contract or a consultative basis. We'd love to hear what your experience is, because we all work on different projects. Do fire in comments on our LinkedIn post or reach out to me and Paul directly. Thanks for listening. Keep your ears open for our next episode. And don't forget to give us that rating before you go if this was your first time listening. Thanks, everybody. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host, Paul Rogers, via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.